Hey everybody, this is Jami Attenberg. She is an American fiction writer who just came out with her first. Sorry, I think that's how like Wikipedia introduces you,
It's
right?
true. Yeah.
But also true story. You are American and you do write fiction, but you also just came out with this memoir. I came all this way to meet you. And that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. And also, I just wanted to introduce you. And I feel like for me, what was really exciting about your work is sort of the intersections between complicated emotions and desires, but also fiction and real life and sort of the stories we tell ourselves that create our identity and sort of how fixed they are and how malleable they are. And so thank you so much, Jami, for meeting me here today and for chatting with me. But I just wanted to kind of start out with a quick question about kind of what do you think, how did you come up with this title? Or can you unpack the sort of multiple layers on the title of the book?
Yeah. So I think the book had 3 or 4 different titles before this one.
Mhm.
And they were, two of them were, the original one was The Bone Chapel,
Mhm.
which is a title of one of the chapters in the book. And then there was A Trip to the End of the World, which is another chapter. And then I think even there was one, Extra Life, for a while, which became the title and the chapter. And then because I just really felt like I wanted to like extract something that was from the book. And interestingly, every time I came up with a new title, I sort of leaned into it in the writing of the book. And so there's like layers to it. And I sort of wrote a new version, like, what if this was the title and what does that mean? And how does it translate across the board? And then finally I came all this way to meet you, which shows up very near the end of the book, which is when I'm walking through an ossuary in Naples. And there's a lot of moments in the book where I'm engaging with having otherworldly experiences in ossuaries and cemeteries and things like that. And different, spontaneous altars, and all over the world. And I have different engagements with these. As I progress as a person, I sort of have engaged differently with the idea of ghosts and haunted spaces and things like that. And so by the time I get to the end, I'm really more at a place of peace, because I'm more at a place of peace with myself, and I'm able to interact with these ghosts or skeleton, the bones that I see. And the first thing I think of is, I came all this way to meet you. Like, I greet them all as I walk through. And so of course there's lots of people that living people that I meet throughout the book too, like lots of friends, lovers, ideas, cities, experiences, and myself. So that's all of it. It's a lot, but
Uh,
it works. It does a lot of work. I love when a title does a lot of work.
yeah, no, I mean, it really does. And I think I could be biased in terms of confirmation that this is how I came to meet it was with this title. So it's hard for me not to imagine a different title, but I feel like I came all this way to meet you. For me was this really beautiful invitation directed at me.
The reader also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was quite nice. I wanted you to talk about, I didn't ask you this in the live, but if you could kind of talk a little bit about what you feel like. I think that being a writer and choosing the lifestyle, the sort of nomadic lifestyle, what you had to give up.
Oh, I don't know. It wasn't anything I wanted to give up, like I missed.
Really?
I mean, I didn't like the challenges of it were that there were moments in my life where I had really, like, I struggled with anxiety issues, which I believe were probably exacerbated by the amount of travel that I was doing and how public facing I was at that, at various times in my life. I hadn't done enough work on myself to really like feel comfortable in that space. I just sort of hurled myself into it. So I suppose there's like a serenity or calm or something like that I like gave up by choosing this kind of path, like on quote unquote normal life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. What did I give up? I have, maybe it took me a little longer to achieve certain goals, like buying this house, but I don't know. I wouldn't have, I guess a 401k, that would have been nice.
That would be nice. I mean, wouldn't we all love that? I don't know if anybody gets 401ks
But there's
these
no
days.
guarantee, yeah, or whatever, retirement plan or something like that. There's no guarantee for, I mean, that's definitely, I'm Gen X, right? So I grew up believing that like if you worked hard your entire life, then like, you'd be guaranteed some, some sort of security or retirement in the end. And of course, now we know a
That's
lot, like that was like a beautiful fantasy that was floated and that we like, that's what we believe to be true. So I don't know what I really missed out on. I don't like think, oh, there's so many paths that I followed and tried that I can't think about. I don't know what I would have. Isn't that I don't have an answer for your question because I feel pretty content.
I think that's a lovely place to be at. And also, I think for me, I've been really curious about like what it takes to sort of be an author or to pursue one's creative practice. And I was wondering, maybe could you talk a little bit about maybe that sort of like the other side of the coin on like what you gave up, what you had to put in?
Yeah, I mean, I just worked really, it was very unstable for a long time. So financially that was really kind of the hardest part. Like the writing part has never been really that hard for me, knock on wood. I don't mean to like take it for granted, but like that is the thing that when you do the writing, it is hard, it is challenging to make your art and to do a good job at it. And so I'm not saying, oh, it's I'm freaking, I'm not trying to be blasé about it or take it for granted, but it is the thing that I can like sit down and do and write. This is my 8th book. So once every 2 years for the last 16 years, I have put out a book. So it's a thing that I know how to do. Right. So it's not, but it does require a lot of work and a lot of focus. It's just like a lot of work. And,
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh no, can you talk about what sort of like your days look like or your daily practice, especially now since you were traveling for a really long time, but now you kind of for the past couple of years have
so funny, right? Because it's like it's not like I got any more work done. It's not like I suddenly wrote 2 extra books a year or something like that. I still am only putting out a book every 2 years. The thing that really changed was because I would tour so much and it was really my way of like connecting and communicating with the world. And I stopped doing that. And then I started doing that my 1,000 words of summer, which I hadn't, I guess could have talked about that before, but I didn't even think about it. I guess maybe I mentioned it, but like that's the different thing is like, okay, I'm not connecting with the world. I'm not traveling around the world. I'm not able to like have these kinds of conversations that I was accustomed to having and like getting energy from that and giving energy back to people. And so instead, what I did was I started my own newsletter and I started this 1,000 Words of Summer project, which is, a big accountability project, group accountability project every summer. And then we do smaller versions of it throughout the year, where you're just writing 1,000 words a day. So that is probably the thing that I started doing differently. But you asked me, did you ask me what my process was or what my daily practice was?
Yeah.
So usually what I do is if I were to be the most productive version of myself, right? Like the ideal scenario is 1, go to sleep early, 2, get up early, go to sleep early. It's Mardi Gras, so it's like, that's not happening. But usually like I get up early, I read for the first hour. I'm not on the phone. I'm not on the internet. I like get up and I will like look at email really quickly because I do have like, books that come out in other countries. So sometimes I have to look at stuff from over there, like that might need a response. But otherwise, I just put on Freedom and I read and I handwrite. And I try to handwrite, and at this point I can handwrite, like I know when I've hit 1,000 words in handwriting, or when I've hit enough that there's enough prompts within it, so I can keep going. I'll know I'll hit 1,000 words. I'll walk the dog, have a coffee, start typing, type it all up until I hit 1,000 words, and that's my work for the day. So I'm usually done by like noon or 1, getting up at 6.
Do you let other people read your handwritten bits?
It's so messy. It wouldn't, but I'm really good about sharing work right away. Like I have a couple of friends, if I say to them, will you read the 1,000 words that I wrote today or this new chapter of the book or something like that? And they'll just read it especially if the chapters are shorter. Like right now, this book I'm working on has like 3,000 or 4,000 word chapters. So it doesn't take them that long to read it. And I'll read things for other people too. So just because you just kind of want someone to go, yes, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And then there's other readers where you wouldn't only send them like a first or second draft. And then there's other readers where you would only send them like a third or fourth draft, like, because you're looking for different things from different people along the way. And also different kinds of readers. Like I have some reader friends who are, or reader writer friends who are like, have a really commercial sensibility and they're really good at plotting. And then I have some friends who are like super great at structure. And then I have some friends who are like really fancy about, like fancy, artistic, beautiful language, like they're just basically poets, but novelists. So there's all these different ways of, or different paths for getting feedback on your work. And
how do you know what type of feedback you need in the moment?
I mean,
I guess some of it might be
kind of like, hopefully at this point I know like what it needs, like where the gaps are. Like I can look at something and go, I don't know how to fix this, but this person might, or maybe it's good and I just need to know that I did it right.
I think for most of the time for me, that's what I'm really longing for. Yeah, I guess I do. I guess for me, I'm not as consciously aware of that process and looking for the different types of sort of needs that could be filled by different readers or different, in my case, people who want to discern aesthetics or like look at things visually. Or is it semiotics, the study of visual symbol, like communication through visual symbols? Is that the right? Anyway, regardless, I feel like it's really interesting to think about it that way. That the writing, knowing what the writing needs, and then filling in the gaps with a certain reader. But most of the time, I just want somebody to be like, "Yeah, man,
great, yeah,
do it." You just have to keep going.
I have those friends. Yeah, I definitely have those friends. My early readers, those are like those people. And there's two. And also like those early readers have changed over the years. Like, because when, especially if like I have some writer friends who were like massively successful and like win huge awards and they're bestsellers and all that kind of stuff. And so when I ask them for their time, I'm like, it better be pristine when I hand it to them. And so, and they might go, bloop, this one little hole here or something like that. So it's really, it's like the best thing you can do, I think, is just get the proper attitude going in and don't take it personally and don't ask for help from somebody you don't want to hear what they have to say.
That is a really hard lesson.
Don't just like, because even if they ask to see it, and even if you feel, I don't know, like, or you have to take it. People are fragile.
Oh, yeah. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
I am also fragile, so I can say it, but I have learned to not. Mostly, I don't know. I would say the early reader response from some people that I knew to the memoir, I got a little like felt a little wiggly inside, and I didn't like it. Not as readers when it was done, like the thing that you had in your hand, the galley, and there were some people who had it, and there was like their response to it was like not. I almost didn't want a response. I hadn't asked for a response, I guess, but you can't control it because it's like you're putting your work out there.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
There must be some thrill though. I mean,
I don't know how asked me in a year. I don't know how I feel about any of it really. I didn't really read any of the reviews. I just read the New York Times review and that was it, which I really liked.
Yeah, I thought I read that too. I was excited to see it because it was like, holy shit, I get to talk to her about this. But how did the people closest, something that I feel like I have to deal with a lot is like managing other people's reactions when they're written, when the content involves them, if that makes sense. And I was curious about like, how did your family members feel about it? Did they read it? Did they?
Yeah, so they have like so my I was just really serious about my intentions when I wrote it. I was like, I really had a lot of conversations with myself. I wrote about it in my notebook. I wrote about it in my newsletter. I talked to other writers who had written memoirs about it, like like this kind of question, and also like, why are we writing? Why is anyone doing this? Why am I writing this? Why would I want to read it? Like 5,000 questions, right?
Yeah.
So I ultimately, like I said earlier in our Instagram chat, like I didn't want to write from like a place of vengeance. I'm writing from a place of processing. I had my mother read it. I had before, because I needed facts checked, and she
Your
asked
mother
me.
was your fact checker.
She was my fact checker in some instances, and she had me make some changes to it, which I was fine with. I had some other people that were in the book, I had them read it. I had and have conversations with them about it. My brother has read it, my sister-in-law has read it. They were really, really supportive, and they really loved the book, and they were really sweet about it. They were like, my sister-in-law was like, I'm so happy, so excited for my niece who's 16 to read it. Like she was like, I wanted her to see how brave her aunt was, which was very sweet. My brother read it and said he was really happy I was his sister. It was very sweet. So even though it's like, it's definitely a warts and all book. I'm not perfect in this book. I feel like ultimately it has brought me closer to my family, which was not my intention, but is a nice side effect.
Mm-hmm. What would have happened? So oftentimes I'll sort of brush up against these sort of like tender spots in expressing what I feel like is going on in a sort of authentic way, but it also might have conflicting sort of desires or motivations or representations with other people's perceptions. Did you have any moments like that?
Wait, say it again.
I'm not the most clearest. Really. I also don't know English. Were there any situations in the book where maybe your mother was like, I don't know if I want you talking about this, or
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Like I said, she had me made me change a couple of things, but I think she would admit this, that like it made her, she didn't know a lot of this stuff about me. So even like there's a little bit of stuff with her about it, and she was like a little bit worried that she was going to have to like answer questions about her life. But I've written about her before.
mhm,
That's the weird thing, is like I've written like all that stuff that's in the book about her, or almost all of it, is previously published material. But for some reason, seeing it like all in one spot like made her feel nervous,
mhm.
like there were no surprises in the material,
I
but
think that
yet.
so recently I had a conversation with Jericho Brown, who said that I can't remember exactly what he said verbatim, but I'm going to try to encapsulate the sort of sentiment that like he needed to have access to all of his emotions, to all of his experiences, whether they were like factual or like feeling based or intuition
Yeah.
based, and letting other people's feelings and emotions dictate what that content was limiting in a lot of ways. And I think as people who produce, because we don't live in a vacuum, obviously we have our work affects other people. Do you feel, what's the sort of where's the threshold or the boundary there for you in like feeling like you have agency to tell your story, but also wanting to be respectful for other
I mean,
people?
it was the original draft of this book, the first draft was 92,000 words. And the final version of it is 72,000 words. So 20,000 words of it have been cut, and for various reasons. And one of the things, but not all of it, but one reason why I would cut things was because I didn't think it would serve any purpose but to make somebody else feel bad.
Mhm.
Meaning I didn't write it because I thought it would make people feel bad. It was something I was confessing that I had done or something like that. But ultimately I was like, I don't know who this is for in the end, or like what this will really accomplish in the world. So like I was really, the stuff that's in there is really specifically supposed to accomplish something, you know? So like that's my gauge, is like, it's all about, it became a part of like this project of the story of my life as a writer, and being, you know, like all the things that I know or was willing to share or anything like that. I hope I did a good job. I hope my intentions were true. Haven't really heard too much bad feedback from people who are in the book.
Um, there was one, well, I think like this is the sort of like, I think my personal interest in this was recently we had to terminate a pregnancy, and I wrote about it in my newsletter, and my mother-in-law was really upset that I had written about it because she hadn't told people yet. And so they sort of, it was not that I should explain why I terminated the pregnancy. I always feel like there's like a need to say that it was a wanted pregnancy. And I think like for me, when I think about like what my intentions were, I really needed to talk about it, and I really needed to process
Your
it.
story.
Yeah, it's tricky. Again, like, should I have, I question, like, should I have leaned into that, or should I, like, is it a crime to like use one's life, or what as a creative outlet, but it's all I have, if that makes sense. Like it's what is fascinating, and it's all I have to speak to in terms of like my own experience.
And you thought it was going to be helpful to someone, I bet.
I hoped so, because I wanted to read it when I was, I think too, like when it was going on, I felt like, I guess there's like a complex web of intentions or rationale. Do you listen to Hidden Brain?
Mm-mm.
Recently they had this podcast about like why we're so judgmental about other people. Like we judge other people on their actions, and we judge ourselves on our intentions. And I think that for me, I kept thinking about this when you kept talking about how much, like, what your intentions were and how that informed the work and the direction. And I was wondering what you thought about sort of thinking about like, oh, we only have this action information from other people, but ourselves, we don't have a lot of access to how other people are perceiving our actions. We only have access to our intentions.
I recently had like a conflict with somebody in my life where I knew I hated their actions, but I knew what their intentions were. And my feelings about their intentions allowed me to forgive them for their actions. And then I was talking to my therapist yesterday about everything. Mm-hmm. And she was like, because I tend to err on the side of like, what were their intentions? Mm-hmm. Because I fucked up so much in my life. And I was talking to my therapist yesterday, and she was listening to everything. She's like, yeah, I think you get to be mad about it. I was like, oh, yay. And it was such a relief. She was like, that was tough. That was like a bad thing that person did, you know? So whether or not she didn't give a shit about their intentions at all. She was like, or like in terms of like how I needed to process it. She felt that I needed to go through the anger part. I had skipped anger and gone straight to forgiveness. And actually, it's all part. We need to do all of it, probably.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's hard. I think also that like, I don't know. I feel like I can never allow myself to be angry. And sometimes I am.
So much strife in the world. So we should add to the strife.
So Jami, I have to ask you, or I have to tell you, so what is the secret you are thinking of?
Oh, I was thinking when you said that there had to be a secret, that I was like, I just gave 72,000 words of secrets to the world. So that's probably enough for now.
Oh, so I think this is great. I also want to revisit really quick. So before this, just to let everybody know, we talked for just a few moments before we started recording. And I feel like if we could explore, there was like a gut reaction that like, I don't want to share what can I find that I can share? But but I want to say this in a sort of most wonderful, validating. I think that's great that you're like, because most everyone, I feel like, immediately when confronted with the sort of question, tell me a secret, they're like, I don't have any secrets, one, which is not true, or at least for me. Like, there are things that I'm like omitting from this conversation that
I know
that
you are.
like not like like they're not like, it's not like I premeditated like, oh, I'm not going to share with Jami, but like I'm sure there's like subconscious things that I'm like not saying, which is a secret in itself, in some ways. But then also I think that there's an honesty about that. Like, yeah, there are things that I don't want to talk about and I'm not going to share with you. And I think that's fucking great. Sorry.
I'm a big boundary person. That's
Yeah.
my superpower for sure, is boundaries. Like, where I'm just like, okay, how is this making me feel right now? Is this something I feel comfortable doing? Like, I'm always like assessing that, because, and I believe it's in a large part because I had to learn to do it. I'm a single person. I'm the person who looks out for me more than anybody else does. I'm the person I have to answer to at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So I didn't have any. I was kind of a messier person for a long time. And I'm not as interested in that.
Mhm.
As time has gone on, I'm just like less interested in that being, a way of life. And I've sort of reined things in and I've grown up. So boundaries are, people will stomp all over them if you aren't careful about it. So I think it's, like, for example, we don't need to litigate like your newsletter experience with your mother-in-law or anything like that, but you knew why you did what you did and you created like the space for it, and there's like a protective field around that information and it's your story. And even in a way, by writing that, you created kind of a boundary and a sense of ownership around it too. I would imagine when you write things down or create art around something, that's you owning it. So don't let her take that away from you. You don't need me to say that to you because you're a grown person, but that was my gut when I heard that story.
That I also think that like for me, I'm trying to honor like when someone says no, that there is a reason. And if I push around it, like for example, I really my partner doesn't process things the same way I do. And I really push for information. And I think it's hard. I don't, oftentimes it's not in my head that I'm like breaking down somebody's bound or pushing up against somebody's boundary. But I think it is like, it takes a lot of work for me to like recognize that boundary is there and honor it and know that it's ultimately the best for all parties involved, I think.
It's fucking hard to be an adult.
Yeah, it is. There was a bit, I think, also in the book about sort of thinking about, I think you worried about, and correct me if I'm wrong, being a people pleaser or like wanting to say yes to everything. And can you just briefly, can we touch on at the end of this, because I know we're like super out of time and I don't want to waste your time. I just feel like everything you say is so insightful. That like, how do you learn how to give up on,
People pleasing.
yeah.
I think it's about, I don't want to say a people pleaser is not doesn't love themselves, but I would say it was definitely about loving myself and valuing my brain and space and time a little bit more. Stop saying yes to everything. And say, I'm so cliched, but stop saying yes to everybody else and saying yes to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Helpful.
Oh. Oh no. Well, Jami, thank you so much for this really beautiful, like, I think for me as a person who this reads like fiction, but it's nonfiction, which is super luxurious. I mean, if
That
that,
was my intention for sure. I was
oh,
like, I'm a
well, excellent.
novelist.
It came through.
I was like, I'm a novelist. This is how do I turn this story of my life into feel having, like, I didn't want to waste what I knew how to do. And so I used it on the book.
Can I ask you, one last thing that I struggle with for some advice on, like, how do you know, we've kind of brushed up against this in other questions, but how do you know, like for me, I wrestle with like, who's going to care? Like, why should I write about my life? No one's going to care. And how did, because I think that you do also wrestle with that at some points. And how do you push past that? Or is it important to push past that? Or do you, yeah.
I mean, I know, because I always say this, but it's like, it's not like I walked the Pacific Coast Highway like Cheryl Strayed did in Wild, you know, I didn't like do anything, but I felt like I had stories I had to tell. For me, this chapter in the book, a trip to the end of the world, was really one of the first things that I wrote. And I knew that I wanted to, I felt like I was never going to be able to get it published anywhere, like in a magazine or a newspaper or anything like that. And I had worked on it for years, like, and had been processing that story about my life for years. And it wasn't until the Supreme Court hearings that I like knew how to like frame that story. And I, once I finished it, I was like, oh, I really want this to exist in the world. And then I just thought I should write a book around it so that it can like be out there in that way. So, and I knew that there were other stories that were like aligned, not necessarily with the content, but just were big enough stories for my life that I felt like it was important. I also knew that like, maybe it would suck, but I hope not. Whenever we
like being okay with sucking.
It could suck, you know, but I hoped it wouldn't. And I wrote my heart out. So
No, well, thank you for serving your heart on a platter so that we could all understand a little bit more about what it takes to be a writer and how our stories shape us. And I love that there's like a neutrality to it all. There's like a poeticness in the how do I say this? Because I hadn't thought about how there's like the good and bad and all of it in between that sort of shapes you, if that makes sense.
yes, I agree. There's and there's not like, I mean, there's plenty of messages in the book, but there's not like there's not easy endings to it. It's not a neat package, really.
But that's what life is.
I
mean,
know.
there's something so satisfying in having sort of what you're reading and understanding be reflective of your lived experience. And I think that this book really does a good job of that.
Oh my gosh. All right. Thank you very much. Very nice.
Thank
Carry
you.
these words with me for the rest of the day.
Oh, I will be honored if you think of it for even a moment longer. Take care, and thank you again for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Bye
It
to
was
your
a joy
mom.
meeting you. Bye.
Bye.